Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going through some must draft fantasy football wide receivers. So these are guys that I think are undervalued at their current ADP, and these are guys that I've been going out and targeting in some of my recent drafts. So I'm going to go through 5 different guys that I think you guys should be going after. And so this is going to range from players going in the first few rounds to maybe a late round option. So I'm going to have all different areas of the draft thrown into this video. If you guys are enjoying the content, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and then let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. I'll respond to everyone who comments, but let's get right into the must-own players. Starting it off, the first guy I'm going to talk about here is Keenan Allen from the Los Angeles Chargers. In my rankings, he is my number 6 wide receiver overall, so he is behind Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley, and DeAndre Hopkins. But right now, he is being drafted as the wide receiver 10, and his ADP has basically been pretty consistently locked into the early 3rd round, and I just think this is way too late for him. I am all in on this Chargers offense. I think Keenan Allen is going to be the alpha wide receiver. He's going to get a ton of volume, and this is an offense with Justin Herbert at quarterback, who I think is already probably a top 10 guy at the position, an insane rookie season. This offensive line has been upgraded this offseason, so that should only help the passing game. And then when you just look at the sample size of how Keenan Allen produced when him and Justin Herbert were on the field together, it was so solid. So taking that 12-game sample size, excluding week 1, because that's when Tyrod Taylor started, then I'm also going to exclude week 15, just because he dealt with that hamstring injury, was barely getting in the game, and it was just an overall poor performance, not representative of a normal game from him. So in that 12-game sample size, he averaged 15.6 half-point PPR points per game, and that would have been the RB5 in points per game on the season. And so I'm expecting him to produce similarly to those numbers he put up in 2020, and that's why I'm targeting him all day in the 3rd round. If I can go running back, and get Keenan Allen as my wide receiver 1 in the 3rd round, that is something that I'm going to be buying into in almost every single draft. If you watch any of my mock drafts, he is probably one of my most targeted players, so I'm going to be all in on him this year. Next up, I'm going to talk about Diontae Johnson. He is going off the board as the wide receiver 24, and that is a late 4th or early 5th round pick, basically right at that turn. But I think he is going to be the target hog in this offense once again. Last season, he was targeted 144 times in 15 games. That was number 6 in the NFL in targets. And what was really impressive about that is that those numbers would have been even better if he didn't leave 2 games very early on with injuries. So basically 2 different times he left the game in the first quarter, and then there was another incident where he was benched in the second half of a game for drops. I'm just going to have to trust that he has fixed that drop issue. Someone so talented as him, he's got to figure that out. But I mean, those numbers could have been even crazier, if he didn't have all those fluke things happen to him. And this year, he's definitely going to be a part of a stacked wide receiver room once again, but I still believe that he is going to be the number 1 option on this roster. He outproduced Julio, who is the most comparable in terms of their roles in that offense, even though he's had less NFL experience than him. So I think, if anything, he's going to continue to separate from him as the alpha in this offense. Then you also have Chase Claypool, but I do think they play basically completely different roles, so I don't really think they're going to be taking away from each other. Last season, the Steelers were number 1 in pass plays per game, and that may regress, at least a little bit this year, just because you do have Najee Harris coming in. I'm guessing there's going to be more of an emphasis on the run game, but I still think they're going to be, in the top half of NFL teams, maybe even top 10 in pass plays per game. And I've kind of seen the argument that Najee Harris coming in, really hurts all these Steelers pass catchers, and I can't really say that I agree. I think Najee is going to come in and raise the overall ceiling of this offense, which likely means more scoring opportunities for Diontae Johnson. Also, the offense is just going to be less one-dimensional than it was last season. They were very predictable down the stretch. They could just not establish a run game, and defenses were just able to key in on those wide receivers. So right now, I think he's being drafted much closer to his floor than his ceiling. And I understand that some people are afraid of Big Ben's regression, but if we're being honest, he wasn't very good last year, and Diontae Johnson still managed to produce. I think if you're concerned about Big Ben, then you should probably be fading Claypool because he's more of the deep target. Diontae Johnson is the underneath guy. He doesn't need Big Ben to have all this arm strength for him to perform. And then we saw Big Ben go out in his second preseason game and ball out. And so I'm going to be all over this wide receiver 24 price tag for Diontae Johnson. The third must-draft receiver I have is Kenny Golladay. Right now, his ADP is at the wide receiver 31, a mid-6th round pick, and his ADP has just fallen off way too far, in my opinion. I was actually buying him at his ADP a few weeks ago, and that was before the news of this injury came out, which really tanked his ADP even more. And right now, it looks like he is on track to play in week 1, so I'm not super concerned about that injury. Obviously, he is not going to be a safe pick. He's going into a new offense, but I do think he still has a lot of upside this season. And I'm normally not someone who likes drafting these riskier players in the first few rounds, but the good thing about Kenny Golladay is that you're drafting him as a wide receiver 3. And so, in the 6th round, I think it's totally worth it when you look at what Kenny Golladay could be. If everything comes together in this offense, you're just not going to be finding a wide receiver 1 on a team who's as talented as Kenny Golladay is this late in the draft. I think the hope here for Kenny Golladay is that he's able to bring his ability as a deep ball and touchdown threat into this New York Giants offense. There's definitely some concerns with having Daniel Jones at quarterback. Definitely not an ideal matchup, especially when you're going from Matthew Stafford to Daniel Jones. But he really wasn't horrible in the deep passing game last season. He didn't have a lot of deep passing volume. He ranked 23rd in the NFL in deep passes. But when he was throwing the ball deep, he was fairly efficient. He was the number 7th ranked quarterback in deep pass completion percentage, and now he's finally going to have an alpha wide receiver 1 who's hopefully going to be able to elevate his play. Like I mentioned earlier, there's not a ton of stability with this pick, but I'm just going to be betting on Galladay's talent and ceiling, and I feel comfortable taking that risk here because he is going as a wide receiver 3. Up next, I have Brandin Cooks. I think he just continues to be undervalued as an NFL wide receiver and as a fantasy football wide receiver. He is going as the 43rd wide receiver off the board, despite tallying 1,000 plus receiving yards in 5 of the last 6 seasons. And I think that not only speaks to his overall production on the field, but also just his ability to stay healthy. I feel like he kind of has this reputation of being a very injury-prone player, and there's no denying that he has had very serious concerns with concussions in the past. But I mean, despite that, he has still only missed 3 games since 2015 in the regular season, so that's obviously pretty dependable when you're talking about him being on the field. The most obvious issue with Brandin Cooks is definitely just the fact that this Texans offense is going to be horrible. This team is just a dumpster fire. But I mean, when you're looking at guys who are going this late in the draft, no one's going to have a totally flawless profile. And even though this is going to be a bad team, he is still going to be the number 1 target and the number 1 option on this roster. And so I think he's going to be able to go out and put up some solid fantasy football performances. And what makes me feel good about Brandin Cooks is he's a guy that can operate as a volume receiver, but he also definitely has that big playability. So I think he kind of combines that safety with also having the ability to put up some of those boom weeks. And so he's a guy I'm definitely targeting, especially, as a mid-tier wide receiver 4. I'd feel super confident with him at that slot. All right, so this is the 5th and final must-draft wide receiver that I have, and this is going to be a late-round guy. It is Marquez Callaway from the New Orleans Saints, obviously the main late-round target for this list. And he is currently being drafted as the wide receiver 60. So this is basically going to be like a last round pick or a waiver wire pickup in 12-team leagues. 10-team leagues, he's probably definitely going to be on the waiver wire. Maybe in your deeper 14, 16-team leagues, he's probably going to be rostered, but it's still going to be very late. And with Michael Thomas still dealing with this ankle injury, we really don't know when he's going to be back. Callaway seems like he's going to be the favorite to take over as the wide receiver 1 in this offense, especially when you have Traquan Smith also dealing with an injury. He's been missing some reps, and Callaway has really taken advantage. We've heard a ton of great reports out of training camp about him. Apparently, he is becoming the top target for Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. And this late in the draft, I just think it's totally worth taking a shot on a player who can be a potential wide receiver one, especially a wide receiver one on a very solid offense. And what makes this pick even better is that, it's not a guarantee that Michael Thomas is going to come back this season. Obviously he's probably going to be healed from his injury, but Michael Thomas and the Saints definitely have some issues with their relationship. I don't think it's a certainty that Michael Thomas, once he's healthy, is going to jump right back into the lineup. So I think Marquez Callaway is kind of a sneaky pick here who has a decent amount of upside, and he's another kind of one of these late round wide receiver targets that I'm going to have my eyes on in drafts, kind of joining this group with Rashad Bateman, John Brown, Cole Beasley, all the guys I've talked about in other videos. Amon-Ra St. Brown thrown in there. All of those players, he's kind of joining that group. So those are the 5 must-draft receivers that I'm going to talk about in today's video. If you guys enjoyed the content, please think about leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. And then also comment down below, do you agree that these players should be must-draft guys at their current price? Do you have some other wide receivers that you really like the value on in drafts this year? Let me know down below and I'll respond to everyone who comments. Make sure you guys stay tuned tomorrow. I'll be talking about do not draft wide receivers. I'll be doing this at every position. So I've already done it for running backs, and then I'll do it for quarterbacks and tight ends. I'm also putting out a mock draft every single day, hopefully, until the NFL season starts. So check out those as well. But that's all I have for today. Thank you guys for stopping in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.